Hello, everyone. As people start to join, hey Blair, hey Minda. Okay, people are starting to, filter in, but I'll start introducing everything. My name is Roseanne Poslensny, and I'm the Director of Membership here at Sister Circle Media. For those of you who do not know what Sister Circle Media is, it is a nonprofit organization that assists with resources and basically like a support group for women of color, specifically in the media and entertainment space. But we have a lot of discussions and a lot of events from month to month, and you don't need to be in media and entertainment to engage in those conversations. So happy Friday to everybody. We have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Minda Harts. She is the author of the best-selling book called The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. Hey Shantiera, hey Aaron. So anyways, back to Minda. I'll do like a really quick introduction for her. So she is the CEO of the Memo LLC, which basically provides workshops and resources for women of color in the workplace. She also is an assistant professor at NYU. She also hosts a podcast called Secure the Seat. She also hosts the Memo Thursdays on her Instagram Live, where she picks a chapter in her book, reads a portion of it, and engages with her audience to kind of share tips and tricks and resources that will help anyone advance in life. So let me bring her on the screen and then we can start our discussion. Let's see. Okay, we're just waiting for her to come up on the screen. Hey, Minda.
Hey, Roseanne, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I hope you don't mind. It's casual Fridays at my house, so.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I'm actually reporting from my couch because I wanted a change of scenery. I've been at my desk all day, day in and day out. I just wanted to have a comfortable place to sit.
Yes.
Yeah. So I caught the Memo Thursdays yesterday, and I shared this a little bit before you came on screen, but I was really happy that you shared that you're still getting comfortable in front of the camera, because that's me too. But I'm trying to like grow and be a better person and all that kind of stuff. So I had to lean into this in order to, assist. So it was helpful for you to share that yesterday, because I was going to do the same exact thing with you the next day. And here we are.
That's good. No, you're doing great. And the more we stretch ourselves, the better, right? So
Yeah, I think so too. So I gave you a brief introduction beforehand on all the things that you have going on, and you have a lot of other things going on that we can like touch upon towards the end, so where people can find you. But yes, the topic today is your book, The Memo, and what women of color need to know to secure a seat at the table. So for those of you who haven't, or for those of the audience that haven't been able to read your book yet, I thought it would be helpful to go into the background of what prompted you to write the memo and what you felt was lacking in, the space of community or career advancement for women.
Yeah, that's a great question. So thanks for having me. Shout out to Sister Circle Media. I really appreciate you being here, and for everyone.
Thank you.
So for me, it was really about centering our experiences, women of color, Black women, inside the workplace. There's so many career books out there that don't talk about us. And so Toni Morrison said, write the book you want to read. And that's exactly what I did, because I was reading and never seeing myself. Of course, there was good information inside these books, but, white men and women aren't the only people who have stories to tell. So it's really my love letter to us, saying you're not crazy. You're not going out of your mind. You're not the only one. Like, our stories, our experiences, our careers matter. And racism doesn't just kill people, it kills careers too. And if we don't acknowledge some of those things, then our careers die, right? Or we maybe miss out on certain things. And so I really wanted to write a book in which, I can't cover all of our experiences, but we have maybe similar themes in the book or experiences. And so I just wanted it to remind people that women don't experience the workplace the same.
I think I at least for me personally, I was at a big company when Lean In had just been published.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of career advancement books, but like I just never got around to reading it. And I realized it's because it's just not my story. Yeah. I do feel that a lot of women's groups within organizations started to lean into the Lean In and had these like lots of these conversations and all that kind of stuff. But like, I just never felt like those spaces were for me. So I never really participated. So I wanted to thank you for, you know, taking that step to write that book, to write the memo, because it is so, it resonated well with me and a lot of other peers that I know. Yeah. So, I mean, like I've been as a personal anecdote, I've been in corporate America for about 8 years now. And for 6 of those years, I saw a lot of people around me that were not people of color getting promotions and getting, you know, opportunities and kind of like landing in their lap. And that kind of like created a mental situation with me. And so I kind of wanted to talk about imposter syndrome a little bit, because I spent a lot of those times second guessing myself, like second guessing and trying to figure out whether I had those skills or what skills I was lacking. So if you could share with us, and you feel comfortable sharing with us, what your journey with imposter syndrome has been and how you were able to finally stand in your light and your confidence.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think because many of us work in environments where we are the only one, you can't help but question your worth. Right? And not to say that everybody questions their worth, but there's so many things, inequalities that are happening around us. And to your point, we see our counterparts getting promoted, they get the extra raises, they get the stretch assignments. And we're like, wait a second, I'm coming in early, I'm staying in late, I'm doing all the things, run the numbers, you know, I'm working just as hard, if not more, and just not getting those experiences. And so I think it starts to play, you know, mind tricks on you, and you start to question everything but them, right? Because that's, we're loyal to a fault, right? We won't say that this is them being unfair, this is the injustices. Instead, we look at ourselves and say, well, what am I doing wrong? What don't I have? And I think that we have to, you know, Audre Lorde says, beware of feeling like you're not good enough to deserve it. And I think sometimes we feel like we're not good enough to deserve it, right? Or we came from, in my experience, I came from a low income background. I entered into this new environment, you know, 7-course meals, forks I don't know what to do with, you know, all of the things. And I started to shrink in ways because I didn't have the same experiences as my counterparts. And I started to tell myself a story that I'm not good enough and all of that. And that really deteriorates your story and your mind. And I talk about in the book of an enemy state of mind versus an empire state of mind. And I really had to redefine success for myself. And I had to lean into what I do bring, right? My story is my story. And I don't have to have the Meet the Joneses story like Kim or Susie, right? Like what I bring is what I bring. And I really had to tell myself a new story every single day about who I am. Do I belong here? And does this environment deserve me, right? And so even now, when I feel nervous or that imposter syndrome tries to rear its ugly head, I stand in my purpose, right? Knowing that I belong in whatever room I go into, but again, not every room belongs or deserves me to be in it. And once I understand what I bring to the room and what the room has to offer me, then I realize that I'm the gift, right? And if you don't see the gift, then I need to find a place that does, or I need to create it. And it's really been a mind shift. And again, I tell myself that story each and every day because there's so many things in this world that will try to tell us differently. And so we have to, I'm happy that you have the sister circle because this is where we reaffirm each other, right? So when we're feeling like that demon is on our back or whatever the case may be, we lean into it and say, no, that's not us. That's not who we are. And that's, you know, what I want us to just continue to tell ourselves a new story. The story that they want us to believe is that we're not worthy, right? But we built this country, so we are more than, you know, we are more than enough, like Elaine Welteroth says. Yeah,
that there's so much truth in that, and I do feel that there's a lot of it's sometimes a tough mindset to break, especially because being a Black woman in corporate America, there are so many things that we have to navigate. microaggressions. We're second guessing ourselves all the time, whether it comes to microaggressions, like, did they mean that, whatever. And like, it just takes a mental toll and it's exhausting. Yeah. So yeah, like that's kind of how Sister Circle started. We just got together and was like, this is what happened to us this week, you know? And then it wasn't, you know, we were just there to kind of support each other and just validate each other to know, like, you know what, we do belong here. We were hired for a reason, and let's, you know, let's show up.
Yeah,
so that kind of helps, you know, segue into the next thing that I wanted to talk about was showing up. I think that I caught in a podcast that you were on you were a guest speaker on. You had said that this is the time to show up when it comes to kind of like working from home and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about what showing up means in this environment, and then also how we might be able to use this time to advocate for ourselves or lay the foundation to be heard in our departments.
Yeah, great question. You know, and I just want to tell you, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I think is important is that we don't shrink. We don't shrink, because it's really easy now that we're at home. You know, for me personally, I haven't been able to get my hair done in months, you know, so it's, I lean to wanting to turn the camera off, right?
Yes.
Just have my nice pretty picture there. But the thing is, people need to see our face. They need to hear our voices. They need to hear what's being said, because it's easy for them to dismiss us when they don't see us. And we want to make sure that we fully show up in these rooms, okay? And so I think we have to. And then also right now, our companies are saying, many of them, not everybody, but many companies are saying, we're invested in our Black and brown employees. This is what we want to do. We want to increase the retention numbers, the advancement numbers, etc. And this is where we just say, okay, I want to be a part of that, right? Start to articulate our value, quantify our worth. I heard you say that this is important. I'd like to be a part of this council. I'd like to, you know, what do we need to do for me to have, you know, you just have to think about what your asks are right now. Yeah. Right? So it's not just, I want more money or I want the title, but how does your ask align with what your company is saying right now? And I really do believe it is our time, because I don't know when we're going to have another opportunity where they're going to admit that they have a deficit in some of these areas. And we can't sit around and wait for someone to tap us on the shoulder and be like, it's your turn. We got to go after it, right? So if that's having a conversation with our manager or a sponsor or a mentor in the company, if it's showing up at the town halls where they're doing the listening tours, like, we got to be in there. We have to say our piece, because we have the microphone right now. And we all have a voice. We just have to decide on how we're going to use it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to kind of go back to, I think that's a helpful template to say, like, okay, so the company has sent me emails upon emails about what they plan on doing and how they, you know, embrace diversity. So let's put some money where your mouth is. So, you know what I mean? Show us that you really do care by doing X, Y, Z. So I think that would be a helpful template. I think templates have been helpful during this whole time, because sometimes people don't really know how to verbalize, you know, what they want or how to frame something in a way that they might be able to, like, get, you know, what they need from them. So yeah, that's a great template. You know, the company cares about this, but so do you? Let's figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of companies are putting together councils, or if they haven't put one together, this is your opportunity to lean into some leadership and say, hey, I'd like to lead this, you know, diversity council, whatever you want to call it, but this is your opportunity to put yourself out there, because again, there's always a window of opportunity. And if we don't take advantage of this right now, you know, it's unfortunate in the backdrop that we're in, but we've worked hard anyway. So don't question why, if you do get the call or if you get the promotion or whatever have you, don't let that enemy state of mind again question, oh, why are they doing this? Take it. It's what you do with it when you get it. And so just leave all that behind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you had said, put yourself out there. So putting yourself out there sometimes is a little bit difficult for people on a personal level sometimes when it comes to dating, but then also, like, within the working, you know, environment, you know, developing relationships with people, especially if they're people that maybe you don't really want to have happy hour with and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Because me personally, I'm typically that person that's like, I'm here to do my 8 hours and I'm gonna clock out. I have my own life. I have my own things to do. I'm not trying to, like, I'm not with that fake ish. You know what I mean? And so I've had trouble trying to figure out what that fine line between, you know, not with that fake ish and like brown nosing, you know, and then playing the game. Like what do you think that fine line is?
Yeah, you have to decide what your line is. But the thing the book says what women of color need to know is secure a seat at the table. If you don't want the table or you don't want the seat, then you don't have to go to those things, right? Again, we do have choices. We have choices that, full stop. But the reality is a lot of getting ahead is a relationship building game. And if we're not in the rooms, even virtual rooms, right? Some of your companies are holding book clubs right now. Some are having virtual happy hours. And if you don't get in on those things, again, showing your face, saying something, and it's not about just going and have a drink, it's being strategic. Who needs to see your face? Who needs to hear your voice? If you know that the CEO is going to be on, or the manager or someone, a mover and shaker is going to be on this Zoom call, you need to be on that Zoom call too, right? So we need to put ourselves out there, because again, you don't even know some of the things that are coming down the pipeline when when we're not a part of it. And so you can't play the game if you're not in the game.
Right.
And again, it's not just to go to happy hour, but it's so you can get the tea, right? So you can understand, again, I talked about what your asks are. Mm-hmm. Hearing the conversations will help craft your asks, right? You'll be able to know what you need to say, what roles you can play. And again, this is how we're building relationships. And if they never see our faces, then it's easy for them to say, oh, well, they didn't come to this, or they're not interested in this. And we want to redefine the narrative. We don't want them creating a narrative for us, right? So they don't see us, so we must not care about our careers. And that's not true. Right. So I think, again, we have to take a hold of the narrative and redefine success on our terms.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do feel like I have a lot of growth to do in that department, because, it is all about who you know and what your connections are and what those relationships are looking like. Maybe once we do go back into the offices, I'll bring some Portos or something for someone. Like, I think that's a really good first step.
Portos always a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think what was important also, what you highlighted in your book and what we just talked about right now, is just kind of understanding what your boundaries are. If you think about sometimes people like to do cards or whatever, and some people are like, oh, that's no problem. Other people might find that really difficult. So bringing in Portos is the best thing, but no one's gonna say no to, free sweets and free pastries. I think that's a really good step. But anyways, I'm trying to build relationships and all that kind of stuff now. Better late than never, I guess.
Better late than never. Better late than
never. But as far as, also I would like to say, or talk about things I do think that it's also important to read the room too and get an understanding of how your department works, because I can say that maybe brown nosing would have helped a little bit in my previous department, but then the next department, that won't really fly with the, department heads. So I think it's also important to not only understand what your boundaries are, but sit back and observe and see how things work. Then you can, plan an effective strategy, I guess.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not about necessarily it's being strategic, right? So if you know that the person that you want to get in front of or you want to connect with hates chocolate, you may not bring in Portos, right? You do something else. You're never going to know that if you aren't in the room and you're not a part of these conversations. And so it is important to read the room so that you know how to play your position, essentially. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about, starting to develop relationships within our departments. And so now that brings me to your relationship with Chuck. So Chuck is an individual that, for those of you who do not know, that served as kind of a mentor slash advocate for her when it comes to specifically salary negotiations. And I think salary in general is a topic that people are starting to open up about a little bit more. Though there are some people who still feel like it's taboo, but I don't have a Chuck yet, and I'm trying to figure out how I can do that. So I guess my question for you is, how did you read the room in a way and identify that Chuck was someone that you could trust and have these discussions with?
Yeah, you know, Chuck, I do believe he fell into my lap in a
Yeah.
sense because I didn't know I needed a Chuck because I didn't know
Yeah.
Chuck existed. And so, but your Chuck could be any person. He could be a sponsor. It can be my Chuck, if you hadn't guessed, is a white man.
Yeah.
He was very much older than me, but I actually did not work with Chuck. I
Yes.
met
Okay.
Chuck at a work event. We happened to be sitting at the same table. It was like a gala, and I thought, oh well, I'm sitting at this table. I'm gonna be here for a couple hours. I might as well talk, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
other part of that is not talking at all, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
want to be
Yeah.
bothered. We've all been there, right?
Yes.
So I think Chuck was sitting next to me, and I thought, oh, you know, I should connect. I should chat, and we got to talking. And at the time, I was in my 20s. Chuck might have been in his 60s then, late 50s, early
Yeah.
60s. And we didn't live in the same state, and so but after our conversation, we had so much in common. And he had this institutional knowledge. We were in the same industry, but he left corporate America to start his own firm. And so
Yeah.
I just said at the end of the night, or he gave me his card, I gave him his card, my card.
Oops, sorry.
Oh,
Uh-huh. My
obviously,
bad.
those are things that happen all the time, right? But one thing I said, you know what, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to move a little different. Chuck said so many great things. I'm going to actually follow up with him
Mm-hmm.
and just say, really enjoyed our conversation, would love to stay in touch, right?
Yeah.
And he wrote back and said, same. And then I would just stay in touch with him.
Yeah.
And we would talk about different things every now
Mm-hmm.
and then, or email about industry specific stuff. And I built that relationship. And I think the part of finding your Chuck, whoever that might be, and your Chuck might be a woman, it might be, you just never know. But you got to put yourself out there to do it. And then Chuck, he saw that I was helpful in some of the things that he was thinking because he had been out of the industry in the ways that I was. And so we were both able to leverage each other. And I would go to Chuck for negotiation because I felt like he probably knew, right? And again, I just thought since he's older, he started his own company, he would know. And so I felt comfortable with Chuck, and I just was honest with him. And I think when we're vulnerable and we're honest with discernment, people will help us. But I think sometimes as Black women, women of color, we're very fearful for the right reasons, because society has shown us. But we do have to let some people in. And I'm so glad. And I question it. I'm like, is this white man? What is he trying to? What's going on? You know, I didn't really know, but I just went with it. And even to this day, he's somebody that I touch base with, and we talk about things. And I'm just so happy. So, more of the story is, you got to put yourself out there to find your Chuck. You got to build relationships to find your Chuck. And me and Chuck couldn't be two different people. When you look at us, you know, you would put us in a room and you think like, where's Waldo? Just the difference, right? And so, but and I think that's part of it. You never know who's going to be part of your squad, right? So is putting yourself out there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I would also like to highlight that, like, you know, we were talking about letting people in. As far as salary negotiations, there kind of isn't any better like person to let in your circle to inform you of that than a white male, because their fathers have asked for their salary and gotten their fathers' fathers, you know what I mean? They have just like a lot of knowledge in regards to what you should actually like appraise yourself at. So it's helpful, I guess, to open your circle.
You got to, because if we're only talking to each other, then we're going to miss out on these situations. I know in the book I mentioned that I didn't even know there was a wage gap till I heard like white women saying 79 cents on a dollar. And then I found out we weren't even making that, you know? So if people aren't talking about their money, then we don't find out that we may be making the same or less or more. And so I think we really have to lean into that conversation, because if we do want to stack our coins, we're going to have to talk about the coins. You know, you can't, we just have to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then also in your book, you kind of talk about having like somewhat of a peer circle that you kind of like talked about, you know, salary, to kind of get a little bit of, you know, market information aside from looking at Glassdoor and online resources. So how did you begin those kind of like difficult conversations? Because, you know, things that might be a little taboo still, you know?
Yeah, it's hard because, again, I think many of us, not all of us, but we may have grown up in houses where we didn't talk about money. You know, money might have been funny, even if it was good. You know, we we just don't. That ain't nobody's business, right? So you don't talk about it. And so I think it was, again, so much of it is really putting yourself out there and letting people in. And I just thought, you know, I'm with my girlfriends, we're at brunch, we're spending lots of money, we're going on trips, we're doing all these things, but we're not talking about our credit scores. We're not talking about like stuff that really matters. Right?
Yeah.
Let me break, like, you know, the fourth wall or whatever you call it, and ask these questions and see kind of where we can go. And once I did put some of that out there, we just got more deeper into the conversations, and we were laughing about, you know, who had to get a secured credit card the first time they went, you know, like all the stuff that you know, you felt maybe some shame around or whatever, you know, you had a low credit score then, and now here's what you did to increase it. You know, I use this place, girl. You know, we really just went deeper. And I think it's really important that we do that, especially with your peer circle, because you can push each other. You may not be in the same industry, but you can check in on each other. You can see what tips we're using. We shouldn't just be tapping our girlfriends for, you know, the best restaurants, but also the best financial advisors, the best, you know, et cetera, and sharing that secret sauce. And so I think it's important that the people that you trust, right, you have these conversations, because when you're in a vacuum, knowledge is power, and you're not going to get that knowledge if you don't talk about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Before we move on to the next subject, I actually caught a question one of the audience members had asked, and that was, what was one major key thing that you learned from Chuck?
In regards to salary negotiation, there's a range for a reason. You know? So, and understanding and doing your work, you'll understand what part of that range you should be asking for. But in my opinion, ask for what you want. And then ask for a little more. Don't ask for what you want, ask for a little more than that. But, you know, Chuck did push me to think bigger, and not based off of what they say, but what I say, right? What is it that I'm asking for? Because part of the equation we can control is what we ask for. But if we don't ask for what we need and then some, then we're not going to get it.
Yeah, that makes sense. A closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Never
as
does.
they say. Okay, so I wanted to transition to getting our mind right for the seat personally. So, you know, we've done a lot of talk about external things, what kind of things we can do externally, but like internally, we've already talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff. But like, let's talk about investing in yourself and what that might look like. I think investing in yourself, you talk about it in your book. I don't think we talk about investing in ourselves enough. We talk about treat yourself, going to restaurants and all that self-care stuff, but like, what are we doing to kind of make, you know, increase our marketable skills? So I kind of wanted to have a discussion on that, and you know, where we might start if we're trying to figure out what skills we want, you know, to, you know, obtain.
Yeah, you know, so to your point, yes, we do talk about ways in which to treat ourselves. And in my book, I talk about invest in yourself, because part of treating yourself is investing in yourself, right? You know, so for example, if you do want to ask for more money, or you have a review coming up, it would make sense to invest in a negotiation coach, right? If that's something that you're not comfortable with, right? Because that's someone else's area of expertise, and how can you lean on their expertise and make your toolkit even stronger? And so I think that's something. I think, again, we can prioritize the trips and the, you know, the drinks, and I know many people have probably gone to happy hour and spent hundreds of dollars, but if somebody passed you information on a career coach for $250, you'd be like,
right,
everybody. But, you know, you'd scoff at that. It's like, why wouldn't you invest in yourself in the same way? And so if we say we want a seat at the table, look at the job descriptions out there for the next position that you want. What skill sets, what extra credentials, what is it that you need to make sure that you're ready when that opens up, right? So if board placement, for example, if you know that you don't have any board experience, then maybe you need to start volunteering at a nonprofit. Like, figure out what it is you need in your toolkit, because some of this, you know, I often say, if you're in an elevator with like Oprah or something, and she asked you, you know, what is it that you need from me? And how many of us would be ready on a dime to be able to say what we needed in that moment? Or would we be like, you know, going back and forth in our head? So it's like, you know, we got to be ready. We got to stay ready. You just never know. And we have to keep investing in ourselves. And you don't have to necessarily do that with money. Your own money, you could ask when you're asking or negotiating. Find out if your company or organization has a professional development fund. YouTube, you know, LinkedIn Learning, Linda, there's all these different things. Instagram lives, you get on the right Instagram live, you might have a whole course, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you just gotta put yourself in those situations. And I think that it's important that we do invest in myself and in ourselves. And I still do that. Even last week, I needed a coach for a certain thing that I just was not 100% comfortable with. And if I'm leveling up to another level, I need people on my team that are invested in my success, and I have to invest in my success. And so don't be afraid to bet on yourself. I always bet on me. Every time I bet on me, I've never lost.
Yeah. I think also what some people aren't aware of is an education budget. I wasn't aware of that until, you know, like halfway through my career, that was like something I could even ask for. And so, but like I said, like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Like I've done it before where, when I found out about that, I was just like, oh, okay, so let me think about like what certification I might be able to like get. And some of these certification courses are thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to let that go. You know what I mean? So all you can do is really like ask your department and see whether that's something that is feasible, present it to them and let them know like why this is beneficial, not only for you, but the department. And then that can just set you up for something, you know, even better if if your time expires there or whatever.
Yeah. Make work for you right now.
Yeah.
You know? That's the best thing.
Yeah. So the next thing I still wanted to talk about like mental state, kind of, personally, but like one quote that you said in your book really stood out to me because it really resonated with me and has for the past year. The quote goes like this: "I've done as much fake it until you make it as I could, and it was killing me softly." I believe that was said in a situation where you may have been passed up for a promotion and you were, doing just enough to get by. I am struggling with that right now. And I wanted to know how you like broke that mindset.
Yeah. Shout out to all the people who felt like they had to fake it till they make it. And I used to subscribe to that, but once you begin to rethink and again redefine success, you realize that those are not good ways to lean into life, right?
Yeah.
And so faking it creates a lot of energy that I just don't have.
Yeah.
That you just don't have. And again, I think that we just have to it's that empire state of mind versus empire state of mind. And if we're we have to operate from a place of abundance and not of deficit, right?
Yes.
And if we're trying to fake it till we make it, then that's a deficit place. But if we're moving in a way that's more authentic to us, then that's out of abundance. And so for me, I just realized that I have to show up. Like I do my best when I show up my authentic self, and yes, you have to find out like what's that mean to you as well. But I think that when we keep perpetuating this fake it till you make it, we just have a lot of fake people, a lot of platform smiles, a lot of those things, and we never get down to the heart of the matter. And also we don't have the conversations that we need to have, right?
Yeah.
So in my situation, I was grinning with this one person that got my job that I thought was mine, that was told to me. And, it was actually killing me to keep pretending every single day with this person. And at some point we have to put ourselves first and realize, okay, I can't stay in this environment, or I can't keep or my grandma says, skinning and grinning with this person. Like I got to have a conversation about some of these things. And so one of the things about writing the memo is I wanted us to know that our careers matter, our voices matter, and that we don't have to silence ourselves, but we do have to have these conversations that center us, right? But how do we get that? How do we articulate what we need to say without burning bridges, right? About those sorts of things. But I think we can come and lean into our courage and push aside our caution, because I think so many of us, I think about past, Black women, women of color, and many have probably gone to their graves faking it till they're making it. And it probably took some years off their life. And so I want us to have a very, spectacular and healthy life. And we just can't afford to keep doing these rounds, because the reality is people aren't doing that for us,
Right.
Like they're not doing that for us. So we shouldn't necessarily do it for them. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what has helped me personally was like, you mentioned, your career blueprint, or like whatever your goals might be. And when I align with my goals, like if I'm ever feeling like, you know, what am I doing? What's going on? I think about what those goals are and like how this position is helping me get there.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of like what's helped me kind of break out of that. But I have to revisit it from time to time because it's just something that I have to keep working on, I guess. But
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only person.
It's a muscle. It's a muscle that we all have to flex, just like asking for more or showing up, you know, in ways that we want to show up in the workplace. It's those constant muscles that we keep having to flex, and working out any muscle is not easy, but it'll always be worth it at the end.
Yeah. You had mentioned burning bridges, and that's kind of something that I wanted to touch upon before we move to the next topic. But, you know, everyone says pick your battles, right? And sometimes, you know, and things can get emotional sometimes at work, you know, you feel really strongly about something. I guess like in your experience, how have you been able to identify which battles to, you know, pick and be vocal about to be seen as like a constructive member of your team or your organization?
Yeah, you know, one thing I've noticed is that well, for me personally, we all, depending on the situation that you're in, we all have different thresholds of pain and tolerance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what might ruffle your feathers on a Tuesday may or may not ruffle mine on a Wednesday, or it might, right? And so it's definitely understanding our threshold. But one thing that I will say for me, if I were to fight all the battles from, you know, 8 to 5 or 8 to 7, then I would just be tired. I wouldn't even be able to do my work, right? And there's always going to be some battles. So you have to decide what are the ones worth fighting. And going back to your career blueprint, what battles align with that, right? What is going to help me get to my end goal? What isn't going to help me get to my end goal? What is going to help me stay sane at work? What isn't going to, right? And so for me, my threshold is, if a situation has happened and I'm not able to speak on that in the moment, and I go back to my desk or I go back to my couch and it replays on a reel, just like the Ghost of Christmas Past, it's like in my head, then I realize that's something I need to address, right? But if I'm okay with it and I can let it go, and some things we do, but if it bothers you where you can't stop thinking about it, that's toxic for your health, you know? So you have to figure out how you're going to deal with that. And so I think for me, it's realizing those things that really bring me pain, right? That I can't keep going. I'm always thinking about this on and on and on. And part of the healing is the release. And sometimes you have to have the conversation to get to the healing, right? And sometimes you realize that this isn't worth my energy. I need to save my energy for the next big battle, because I know that this is going to, you know, happen. And again, it goes back to the stories that we tell ourselves and making sure that we're centering ourselves, because again, being in a predominant environment, we're very used to catering to everybody else and not putting our feelings first. And so what would it look like if you put your feelings first?
Yeah. I think you said in another interview, humanizing the workplace. Like what happened to that? You know, we have kind of like become this, you know, this society where it's just kind of like, cry outside. You don't need to, you can't have your feelings at work. You can't be going through things. You're here to work. And I've been having trouble with that recently, especially because politically there's a lot going on, and it's difficult for me to have small talk about when we're returning to the office, when people are outside marching and doing all of this stuff. I think this time has really shifted a lot, or like disrupted a lot of the compartmentalizing that we are so used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that too, like if you need a mental health day, take a mental health day. You know, like there's a lot going on. We're in a global pandemic and we're in a racial pandemic. And I think it's really important that I think companies are trying to figure it out. But again, that can't be at the expense of our own well-being, right? The problem they created. We'd like to be part of the solution if that helps our goals and our environment in the future, you know, people of color that come inside the environment. But we also have to know when to say enough is enough, or I need, you know, now is not the time to have this conversation, because we haven't really had time to grieve, because here comes another thing, right? Here comes another thing. And it's really tough. And to your point, you know, humanizing the workplace is very important, because if you go into an environment and something happens, you know, and this isn't to like say anything but giving about mothers, but for example, like we humanize a mother's, in many environments we humanize a mother's experience, right? Or you know, we have the right lactating rooms for them, or we have you know, you have to leave, so there's flexible scheduling. But when it comes to people of color, we don't get the same type of treatment in certain ways when it comes to what we're dealing with, right? Like it's almost like racialized trauma is not the same as any other experience in the workplace. And I hope that the more that we talk about it, we humanize our experiences, right? That, okay, maybe, yes, we said happy Juneteenth, but what's it like when we go back on Monday, right? You know, what is being said? You know, are we having an environment in which our people of color can have a conversation without any backlash, right? You know, what are the boundaries that we're putting in place, or the safeguards for us to be able to thrive, just like we would want mothers to thrive, or other, you know, intersections to thrive. And I just wish that people would see us as not like these magical, you know, creatures, but human beings, you know?
I think speaking about like this time frame and all that kind of stuff is very important, and I think this is a great segue to that kind of has parallels to one of the chapters you have, and that is white women in the workplace. And the empathy and the empathy gap. So before I get into all of that stuff, I wanted to see how you were doing. Like, we're talking about humanizing, how your energy level is, because I know that there have been a huge uptick in the amount of white people reaching out to people of color, especially Black people, saying, how can I help? What can I read? And all that kind of stuff. And a lot of my friends are having difficulty like conserving their energy. So have you been doing anything to kind of do that?
No, unfortunately, I have not done a good job of it because part of being Black in the workplace is that you have to do your work and try to figure out your feelings too at the same time. Right? So we've been told. And for a while, I felt like I had to respond to everything, you know, friends, family, business, those sorts of things. And then at some point, I just like put my phone down. Like, I can't even physically tell you if I have to type out white fragility one more time for you, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to scream. I realized again, I have to, you know, center myself and realize that this is traumatizing to me, right? Yes, I do talk about a lot of these issues, but I also have to find the space and grace for myself. And so I don't think we should make any apologies for doing that, because this is a marathon and we're going to be too tired to finish the race if we don't find those safeguards to have these conversations and critical conversations. Just and the last thing I'll say is we really have to set boundaries during this time period, because there was a time not too long ago where if we brought up race, it wasn't politically correct. And now that white people want to talk about race, then we should be ready like that night to talk about it. And that's not the way that this works, right? So we have to put those safeguards in place to say, you know, I need a minute, or, you know, here are your resources, but I can't talk about this right now. And I think that's part of, you know, making sure that we center ourselves. And I think we can take care of the narrative, but it's going to take all of us, you know, collectively doing it as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that like throughout this whole time, there have been kind of like high level, two different kind of like thought processes. There have been a lot of Black people that are like, I am not Google. You can go to Google and figure that out yourself. But then there's other people that are like, I am appreciative that they feel comfortable enough to come to me and ask me these questions. I also think it's really important too, because if they do their Googles on their own, they might get some video that is not of the collective, because we know as Black people, there's a lot of like disagreement with, you know, certain things and the way certain things should be held or, you know, addressed. So in order for them to get the right, you know, resources, I think it's helpful and important for us to kind of like, you know, hey, here's a bunch of resources. And I guess the good thing also about like social media is that we've been seeing so many people compiling a bunch of reading lists, a bunch of resources. What's helpful to conserve energy is just send them that. You know, you don't have to talk about it. Just be like, you know what, I don't have capacity right now, but please look at this. And here's a starting point for you.
Go down the list, you know, holler at me when you get down to the end.
Exactly. Nothing earlier. Yeah, so back to kind of like white women in the workplace. I mean, it's quite clear that white women have been really complacent in the mistreatment of Black people in the workplace. And like I said, there's so many parallels right now. White people you know, as a whole, you know, being complacent in the mistreatment of Black people, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's by police brutality or whatever. So I guess my question is kind of along the same lines of this, like, how have you been helping to close the empathy gap, but like also holding them responsible for what they need to do too?
Yeah, I think part of it was because I know how heavy a lift it can be for us, you know, as women of color and Black women, to always be in a position where we have to be the teacher and give the homework. You know, writing the memo was part of so that my sisters don't have to do all the heavy lifting, right? You know, like in the book I talk about it. I talk about the empathy gap, and I think it's back to humanizing the workplace. It's very easy for white women to say women in the workplace, but then have no intersectional lens. Right?
Yeah.
You know, all of our experience is the same because we've all experienced sexism, but we all don't experience racism. Therefore, we can't use these broad strokes for solutions. And I think there also has to be some owning of privilege. And I think that privilege is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's how do you want to use your privilege for good? And I think that's the piece that I think falls on, you know, on ears that are closed with some white women. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but how are you using your privilege? Like, we can't keep pointing just to white men all the time. Like, you've played a role in this too. Again, it doesn't mean you're racist, but it could mean that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, but it's, what are you going to do now? Now that you know, what are you going to do with that information? And that is the part that I just think they have to own, that they're privileged. They're closest to proximity. They're closest to they are more represented in the executive suite, on boards, in the wage gap. You know, I mean, the numbers don't lie. And until they understand that there's some work to do on their end, and that's part of, again, humanizing us, right? Seeing us as women, because you wouldn't say that women make 79 cents on a dollar when, you know, women of color are making 48 to 63 cents on a dollar. Like, you know, that's just a slap in the face. And I think it's an education part of it, and it's owning that privilege. And so I think once they can do that, we can start to close the empathy gap, because they just can't empathize with our experience because they don't know us, right? They haven't gotten a chance to know us. And I think that it's important, you know, I'm glad they are reading the lists and reading the things, because I think maybe they would see themselves in us. Everyone's been othered at some point in time, right? And so if they can empathize, if they can see that and make some connections, that it's not just about Black lives have to matter inside the workplace, outside the workplace, all the way around. And I think once people understand that, then again, we're humanizing the experience of people of color. But I find that a lot of people they might say Black lives matter on the outside, but what's it look like on the inside of your home, in the inside of your company? And I think as leaders, because we all are, we have to figure out, or white people in particular have to figure out how they're going to be part of the solution, because it's been so many years that they've been part of the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what's kind of throwing me off now, like with this particular situation, I mean, this is not a new story for Black people at all. But I do think that this time, I think people are starting to have the conversations of, like, I think white people are starting to admit that they are aware of their privilege. I think they've always been aware of it, but now they're like, oh, actually, yeah, I think I do have white privilege. And so it's kind of like fostered all of the sharing of resources and all that kind of stuff, which I think I'm grateful for. I mean, like, you know, in my opinion, this discussion should have happened in 2016, but we are where we are, you know what I mean? But yeah, I do think that this is a really good time to kind of take advantage of this window of opportunity, like you said, and be able to have these discussions with people. And Erin is saying forced to admit. I think it is a force of admission.
It is forced.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, and they don't get any badges for now waking up to it. They are forced.
Yeah,
so, but definitely. I'm glad. I think being in quarantine forced a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so too.
You know, so I'm sad that COVID-19 came, but if this is the way that wakes people up, then we, you know, to get them to see someone, you know, because let's be honest, if they were to have seen George Floyd walking down the street, they might have clutched their purse, right? It took a foot on the neck, him not being able to breathe, for them to humanize his experience and to realize that it's not just about the physical foot on the neck, but what about the proverbial foot on the neck as well, and how they put their foot on necks every day. And so I think it really, I'm just glad that, to your point, I'm an optimist. So hopefully this new information will inspire, not just for the moment, but for a movement.
Yeah, I agree there. And yeah, so we have about 10 minutes left. There's one last, thing that I wanted to do before we go into kind of like our outro stuff. But we were talking about the wage gap, and in your book, you kind of, there was a teachable moment in which you were, in a women's group, and they were saying, oh, we make, 79 cents on the dollar. And you're like, wait, hold on 1 second. Actually, there's more nuances to it. And like I said before, I do think that this is a time where people are starting to realize that there are nuances within each like oppressed group. But like, I'm not sure if you have any like tips or tricks when it comes to teachable moments on like what have you found has been like digestible for the Beckys and Karens of the world?
So that's a great question. And I don't know that I necessarily have the answer for it, but what I do find is when I'm able to make a teachable moment through storytelling, right? So I'm telling a story, hopefully people will be able to resonate with that, even if they are, white or a man or however they may identify. Because again, I think humanizing situations, right? How would you feel if I was your sister or your mother and these things were happening? And when I talk about it from that perspective, and not in a like, if you don't do it or else, like everybody has their different approach, right? And so that's part of bringing your authentic self to the conversation. And for me, it's really through storytelling and being clear. And it's taken a long time for me to get here, and I'm still working on that. But I think the more that we're clear and we give concrete examples of how this hurts people, right? Like I've cried some of the same workplace tears as my grandmother, right? When they hear certain things like that, you feel something, right? But if you only tell excuse me, if you only tell them the facts, so Black women only make 63 cents on a dollar, then that may not resonate with them, right? That's too bad for them, right? But when you talk about some of the other factors wrapped into that, then I think it's part of creating this case, creating this story in which they can maybe see themselves in. And so for me, that's been helpful, because stats are great, but you also have to put the feelings and the facts together and wrap them up. And I think that's how it works a little bit, because I think right now people are so scared to be called Karen, or so scared to be called something that, it's just like they put earmuffs on their ears. But if we tell them the same thing we've been telling them, but maybe in a different way, it may get through a little bit different, right? But again, our tolerance levels are different. So someone may not have the time to do what I'm going to do with it, but we definitely have to find what's comfortable for us. Yeah.
And I do think that, like, we've been talking about this window of opportunity right now. I do think that for people previously who haven't necessarily had a voice or had the confidence to, say, actually, you know what, that hurt me and here's why. And to give like some kind of background for these teachable moments, this time might be a good time confidence-wise for that. You know what I mean? People might be more receptive to, learning about what those teachable moments are. Like I've had so many comments on my hair in corporate America, but it's like, and there have been so many teachable moments, but I was so young and so, new to this that like, I didn't even know that was a microaggression at the time. You know what I mean? And so like, when it does happen again, I think that this time has like given me the confidence to be like, you know what, actually, like, like to have the confidence to say something about it, because that's kind of like how we change things. And so I think I'm like grateful for this time. Like, I'd love to be outside and all that kind of stuff, but like I do think that like quarantine has made a lot of people self-reflect a lot and think about like what their next move is and what their next, what they want to do in life, what they want to find out of life. So it, like you said, it's kind of like an unfortunate situation that COVID has like forced this, but at the same time, like this is where we need to be. This is where we needed to be a long time ago. So I'm kind of like,
it's here now. And when these things happen, to your point, we can kind of leverage this, right? So maybe you couldn't have said the hair thing before, but now we're in this like racial weirdness backdrop in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so now you get to make it a teachable moment, because
Yeah.
a lot of white people want to be like, tell me what I'm doing wrong. And so
right.
we're gonna have to tell them what they're doing wrong if we feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been a really wonderful discussion. I want to thank you for your time. You're a super, super busy woman. So thank you for showing up here and, like, you know, blessing us with your knowledge. You have, I had mentioned at the beginning that you have a lot of things going on, your podcast, your website, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to give the floor to you to kind of like let the people know where they can follow you and what kind of resources you have, because let me tell you guys, like, there's no, like, there's so many resources that she offers. There's no way to, you know, you can stay engaged with you, you know, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you. You did a great job interviewing me. You made it very comfortable. Thank you to everyone who joined in today. Yeah. Follow me, at Minda Harts on all platforms. And I do IG Thursdays. I do LinkedIn Live on Mondays. I'm most active on Twitter, but you can also go to mindaharts.com and sign up for my mailing list. If you haven't gotten the book, the memo, this is what it looks like. You can buy it wherever you like to buy your books. The hardcover, Audible, and Kindle are out right now. The paperback comes out in the fall. So if you go to buy it and you see the paperback September 15th, there are other versions. But, you know, I just want you to know that you deserve it. You've worked too hard to lean out now, and we have to have this collective voice, right? And this is our time. And so I want you to get what we've been waiting for, what our ancestors worked so hard for us to grab. Right. It's within reach if we make the right ask. And so let's make the workplace better than we found it.
Yeah, I agree. And there are so many other topics we could have covered, like resume stuff and all that. But what I wanted to direct the audience to was your podcast, Secure the Seat, because and even your, you know, Instagram Thursdays, the Memo Thursdays, because there are so many resources, and you get people that are kind of subject matter experts on, like, resume building or whatever. And so anyone that wants any specific information, go find what you're looking for, because it's out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So well, with that being said, thank you so much for everything. As a little housekeeping for Sister Circle, next month we have Sister Circle for the Soul for Jen Anderson. Please follow Sister Circle Media to keep abreast of all of the things that we have going on. But thank you so much, Minda. Enjoy your weekend. Have a wonderful Friday, and we will stay engaged with you.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.